If you look at the top 20% of companies adopting artificial intelligence right now, their productivity hasn't just gone up. I mean, it is absolutely skyrocketed.
Yeah, big time.
We are talking about like 163% productivity growth. But here's the part that defies almost every headline you have probably read recently.
Right.
Those exact same companies are hiring human beings faster than anyone else in their sectors.
It's wild. It completely flips the narrative.
Exactly, because there is this pervasive assumption right now, whether you are sitting in a boardroom or, just chatting at the kitchen table, that AI is basically a grim reaper for jobs, that it's quietly waiting in the wings to hollow out employment, compress our wages, and leave the average worker totally obsolete.
Yeah, that's the fear.
But today, we are taking a deep dive into a stack of research that flips that anxiety on its head. We are looking at this really fascinating analysis by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover,
Which is largely based on the latest data from PwC's 2026 Global AI Jobs Barometer.
Right. And the mission of this deep dive is to explore the counterintuitive reality of what actually happens when an organization goes all in on automation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because everyone thinks AI is an organizational bulldozers, but the data suggests it's actually more like a superpowered fertilizer for employment.
I love that analogy. And we are going to be synthesizing some massive employment data sets today alongside real organizational case studies to explain the actual mechanics behind that hiring boom.
Yeah.
The goal here is to look at not just what is happening in the macroeconomic labor market, but why this matters for you, the listener, and your own career trajectory.
Because it really does impact everyone.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
How you position your skills in response to this shift, well, it's going to dictate your professional future over the next decade.
So let's start with those numbers, because that is the hook that really caught my attention.
Sure.
I read those PwC figures and immediately had to ask how a company achieving that kind of massive efficiency gain doesn't just, immediately shrink its workforce.
Yeah.
Right, because the traditional model of corporate efficiency is usually about doing more with less.
Exactly. But this data suggests they are doing vastly more with more people.
Well, to understand the mechanism driving that, we really have to look at the three fundamental economic forces that collide whenever a disruptive technology enters a workplace.
Okay, lay them out for us.
So the first is the substitution effect. And this is the baseline fear most people have.
The robot taking my job.
Exactly. It happens when an algorithm directly replaces human labor for a specific, usually routine task.
Right.
Think of like a piece of software that can automatically scan incoming invoices, extract the data, and log it into a ledger. The human who used to manually type those numbers is no longer needed for that specific task. The machine substitutes the labor.
It's kind of the equivalent of the electronic spreadsheet arriving in the 1980s, right?
That's a great comparison, yeah.
Because before VisiCalc and Excel, you had entire floors of accountants doing manual arithmetic with pencils and paper.
Oh, yeah. Rooms full of people just doing addition.
And the software didn't destroy the accounting profession. I mean, it just completely destroyed the task of manual arithmetic. Suddenly, accountants were freed up to actually analyze the data rather than just compile it.
Which turned them into financial strategists.
Exactly.
And that is a perfect transition to the second force, which is the productivity effect.
Yeah.
Because that routine arithmetic or data entry is being handled instantaneously, the remaining human workers can process vastly more output in the same amount of time.
They just get way faster.
Right. The firm becomes highly efficient. And when a firm becomes that efficient, their cost of production drops.
Which usually allows them to lower prices or offer better services.
Right. Exactly. Which then expands their market share. And to handle that new scale, they have to hire more people across the board.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, they need more account managers, more salespeople, more quality control personnel to handle the sheer volume of new business.
That makes a lot of sense. And then there's the third piece, which the text calls the complementarity effect.
Yes. And what's fascinating here is that this is where the true growth happens. Complementarity is when the AI actually creates entirely new, high-value tasks that require distinctly human traits.
Like what kind of traits?
Things like judgment, creativity, or complex social intelligence.
Okay, give me an example.
So if an AI flags an anomaly in a massive global supply chain dataset, it doesn't know the nuanced geopolitical context of why a shipping port in another country suddenly shut down.
Right, it just sees a red blinking light on a dashboard.
Exactly. A human has to step in, Interpret the AI's flag, get on the phone with suppliers, navigate the cultural nuances, and negotiate a new contract.
Wow, okay.
The technology created a highly valuable problem that only a human could solve.
Yeah.
So what the PwC data reveals is that in mature AI-adopting firms, the productivity and complementarity effects are completely overpowering the substitution effect.
Okay, I am going to push back on that a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
Purely from the perspective of a hyper-rational, maybe even ruthless executive.
Mm.
If my workforce is suddenly immensely more productive because of these tools, why wouldn't I simply choose to keep my company's total output exactly where it is today, fire half my staff, and just pocket a massive profit margin?
It's a fair question.
I mean, the math says I could run the exact same business with 50% fewer people.
You absolutely could. And honestly, some companies do try that.
Right.
But the research frames this as a fundamental organizational choice. It's defensive cost reduction versus strategic capability expansion.
Okay, break that down.
The executives choosing defensive cost reduction, firing half the staff to maintain current output, they might see a short-term bump in their quarterly profits.
Sure, Wall Street might love it for a month.
Right. But they're essentially freezing their company in place.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the executives choosing strategic expansion are looking at that productivity boost and seeing a weapon.
A weapon to use against competitors.
Exactly. They realize that if they keep all their staff and arm them with AI, they can suddenly develop entirely new products, enter new markets, and just innovate at a speed their competitors can't match.
Ah, so the company that just shrank to save a few bucks is going to get absolutely crushed by the company that used the technology to grow.
Yes. If you stand still, your competitor eats your market share.
That is wild.
That is the dynamic driving the hiring. They see the technology as a capability amplifier, not merely a cost-cutting tool.
Well, if that explains the underlying logic of why these organizations are still hiring, it naturally brings up the question of who they are actually looking for.
Yes, the demographics of hiring are changing fast.
Because the daily nature of the work is shifting, and the text highlights a massive premium being placed on certain skills. The PwC data shows that since 2021, wages for what they call professionalized, AI-exposed roles have increased by 42%.
42%. This raises an important question about how we even define human value at work. Well, that wage premium is the market's way of valuing the complementarity effect we just talked about. When routine cognitive tasks are automated, you are no longer being paid to process information.
Right, because the machine does that for free.
Exactly. You are being paid to navigate ambiguity, to build trust with clients, and to exercise complex ethical judgment.
And what really stood out in the research is how early in a career this demand is hitting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the data shows that entry-level positions in these AI-exposed firms are requiring senior-level capabilities at 7 times the rate of less exposed firms.
That's staggering.
7 times. They are demanding complex judgment, empathy, and creative problem-solving right out of the gate.
There is actually a 2023 study by Brynjolfsson and his colleagues that illustrates exactly why this is happening.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about that one.
They looked at customer service workers using generative AI tools. And what they found was that the veteran, highly experienced workers didn't see a massive boost in their performance from the AI.
Huh. You'd think the veterans would be the ones maximizing it.
Right, but they already had the skills. It was the newer workers who saw incredible gains.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the AI provided them with the situational pattern recognition that usually takes years to develop through trial and error.
So it is effectively removing the training wheels phase of a career.
Exactly.
If you think about a traditional entry-level job, maybe you spent your first 2 years fetching data, organizing spreadsheets, or doing very basic procedural support.
Paying your dues, basically.
Right. You had time to slowly absorb the culture and learn how to handle complex client interactions by, watching your boss.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if the AI handles all the procedural support instantly, it's like being handed the keys to a sports car on day one. You are being asked to navigate complex emotional terrain and high-level strategy immediately.
Yeah.
But isn't that incredibly terrifying for someone just entering the workforce?
It creates a notoriously steep on-ramp, for sure. You are expected to deliver high-value insights from day one.
Yeah.
However, the flip side of that pressure is that the work is significantly more meaningful.
Interesting.
The Brynjolfsson study noted that because these newer workers were able to successfully solve complex customer problems much earlier in their tenure, the job satisfaction actually went up and turnover decreased.
That makes sense. No one actually likes data entry.
Exactly. The technology acts as an equalizer, allowing a junior employee to punch far above their weight class, provided they have those soft skills.
But wait, if this technology creates such massive growth, drives up wages by 42%, and makes the work more meaningful, you would expect every Fortune 500 company on Earth to be executing this flawlessly.
You would think so.
Yet, looking at the implementation realities and the sources, the failure rate is staggering.
The gap between theory and execution is massive right now.
Yeah.
A 2023 report by McKinsey found that while over half of organizations are experimenting with AI, only about 10 to 15% have actually embedded it deeply into their core processes.
Only 10 to 15%.
Yes. And further research estimates that up to 80% of AI projects completely fail to transition from a pilot program into a scaled company-wide deployment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That implies the barrier to success isn't the technology itself.
Exactly.
I mean, if the software works in a pilot but fails when you try to roll it out to the whole company, you are dealing with a human management problem. You are dealing with flawed organizational architecture.
You hit the nail on the head. Many leadership teams make the mistake of buying a revolutionary dynamic technology and trying to shove it into a rigid traditional management structure.
They want the new tech to just do the old job.
Exactly. They treat AI like a new piece of factory machinery. They just want it to do the exact same broken process they currently have, just slightly faster.
Right.
The researchers call the necessary solution an operating model redesign. You have to be willing to rethink how value actually flows through your company from start to finish.
And the case study on DBS Bank in the text breaks down that redesign process perfectly.
It really does. It's a textbook example.
Because they didn't just look at their frontline tellers and say, hey, let's build a digital kiosk or a chatbot to do exactly what the teller does so we can fire them.
Right, which is what most companies do.
Yeah, that is just paving the cow path. Instead, DBS Bank looked at the entire customer journey. They implemented AI to handle all the back-end routine transactions, the clearing, the basic data verification, but they retained the human staff and completely changed their daily workflow.
They broke down the traditional functional silos. Those employees were no longer evaluated on how many basic transactions they could process in an hour.
Right.
They were freed up to become high-level advisors.
So imagine how that actually changes a Tuesday morning for a bank employee.
Paint the picture.
Okay, instead of spending 3 hours keying in deposit slips in silence, they arrive at work and look at an AI-generated dashboard.
Okay.
And the dashboard flags that a long-term client just received a significant business payout and also has a child approaching college age.
Connects the dots for them.
Yes. The human employee then makes a warm, context-rich phone call to that client to discuss tailored wealth management and education investment funds.
That is a completely different job.
Exactly. The technology didn't just speed up the old job, it fundamentally altered what the person was paid to do. And DBS Bank expanded their employment while becoming one of the most profitable banks in their region because of it.
But that kind of fundamental workflow shift requires a massive amount of coordination.
I can imagine.
You have to combine technologists, designers, and the frontline business specialists in fluid teams to constantly refine how the human and the machine interact.
Yeah.
Traditional top-down command and control management just chokes that kind of innovation because it relies on very narrow, rigid job descriptions.
Which brings up a huge issue. If a company realizes they need this massive operational redesign, they run into an immediate human hurdle.
Resistance to change.
Pure panic. I mean, if an executive walks into a room and announces that they are fundamentally redesigning everyone's workflow using artificial intelligence, half the room is going to quietly start updating their resumes under the table.
Without a doubt.
So how do these successful companies actually manage this transition without triggering a mass exodus or active resistance from their workforce?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the organizations that are succeeding are prioritizing a concept from organizational psychology called procedural justice.
Procedural justice. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
At its core, it means that employees will accept major disruptions and even embrace them if they perceive the process of change to be fair, transparent, and inclusive.
So they have to feel involved.
Exactly. The transition has to be something done alongside the workers, not something imposed upon them from above.
The Unilever recruitment example highlights the transparency part of that equation really well.
Yes, that's a great example.
Because they rolled out an AI-powered screening tool for their hiring process. But they didn't just drop the software on their recruiters' desks with a manual.
Right, they didn't just dictate it.
Right. They proactively proved to the recruiters, using internal data, that the tool was actually expanding the diversity of their candidate pools.
Mhm.
And more importantly, they explicitly told the recruiters that the AI was there to buy them time to build actual relationships with candidates, not to replace the recruiting department.
That changes the whole vibe.
It really does. They even built in mechanisms where the human recruiter could override the AI if they felt its assessment was flawed.
And giving the workers agency over the tool is a hallmark of procedural justice.
Yeah.
Another vital element is participatory design, which AT&T demonstrated on just an incredible scale.
Oh, right, the 100,000 employees.
Yes. They realized they had over 100,000 employees working on legacy technologies,
Mhm.
things like copper wire networks and older routing systems that were rapidly becoming obsolete.
And most companies would just do a massive layoff.
Exactly. But instead of laying off 100,000 people and trying to hire 100,000 new cloud computing experts, they built an internal platform for transition.
The mechanics of how they did that are fascinating.
Walk us through it.
Well, they didn't just blindly assign people to classes. They built a transparent mapping system. A worker could log in and see, okay, my current role is projected to decline.
Which is scary, but honest.
Right. But then the system would highlight 3 emerging roles within the company that shared a similar foundational skill set to what they already knew.
Hmm.
And then AT&T partnered with universities to provide the specific bridging courses needed to make that jump. They brought the workers and the union representatives into the actual design of those pathways.
That's the participatory part.
Exactly. It wasn't a blind leap into the dark. It was a brightly lit, transparent map.
And that leads to the final pillar of bringing workers along, which is income security during the transition.
Right. You can't learn if you can't pay your rent.
Exactly. Look at NTUC Income, which is a major insurer in Singapore. When they introduced AI to handle bulk claims processing, they didn't fire the claims department.
What did they do?
They systematically redeployed those workers into customer advisory roles.
Oh.
But they didn't just hand them a new job title. They provided extensive training and guaranteed their salaries during the entire learning phase.
Okay, I have to ask a very grounded question here.
Sure.
Because the leap from a back office claims processor to a frontline advisor is massive.
It is a totally different skill set.
Right. We are talking about someone who might be used to looking at spreadsheets in silence all day, suddenly being asked to sit across from a client, navigating a complex, emotionally charged medical claim.
Yes.
Can a company actually teach that kind of deep empathy and strategic advisory skill? And how much time and resources does that really take?
It is an incredibly heavy lift, I won't lie.
Yeah.
And it requires what Harvard researcher Amy Edmondson calls psychological safety.
Psychological safety.
Yes. A company cannot simply mandate that an employee become empathetic by Friday.
Right.
They have to structurally protect time for learning within the work week. If an employee is terrified that making a mistake during a training simulation will cost them their job, their brain goes into survival mode and complex learning just completely shuts down.
So they freeze up.
Exactly. NTUC Income succeeded because they absorbed the financial risk of the transition, allowing the employees the psychological breathing room to actually develop those soft skills without fearing for their livelihoods.
So what does this all mean for you?
For a listener, yeah.
Right. Shifting the focus directly to the person listening right now, navigating their own career. We have talked about boardroom strategies and macroeconomic trends, but how do you actually apply this to ensure you aren't left behind?
Because the ground beneath your specific job description is likely going to shift multiple times in the next 5 years.
Exactly.
Well, the overarching framework you need to adopt is what the research calls strategic workforce architecture.
Okay, what does that mean for an individual?
It means individuals need to aggressively detach their professional identity from rigid job titles.
Huh.
You are no longer just an accountant or a copywriter or a logistics manager. You are a fluid portfolio of capabilities that can be dynamically applied to different problems.
Okay, so it's about developing hybrid capabilities.
Precisely.
You shouldn't just be rushing to a boot camp to learn Python, because writing basic code is exactly the kind of procedural task that AI is getting exceptionally good at automating.
Exactly. You'd be skating to where the puck used to be.
Right. You need to focus on the intersection of the technology and the human element. You need to understand human AI workflow design.
Yes.
You need to know how to critically analyze an AI's output, identify its blind spots, and translate that data into a strategic narrative that a human stakeholder can actually trust.
And that capability development has to become a continuous weekly practice. It can't just be a one-time workshop. Leading organizations actually recognize this mandate. Amazon, for instance, has publicly committed to providing free AI and machine learning skills training to 29 million people globally by 2025.
29 million. That is a massive scale.
It is,
Yeah.
because they understand that to reap the macro benefits of this technology, capability development cannot be hoarded by a small group of elite software engineers. It must be universal.
But there is a glaring societal risk here, isn't there?
Oh, definitely.
If the new baseline for entry-level work requires complex judgment and you have to constantly self-educate just to stay relevant, doesn't that threaten to lock out a massive portion of the population?
Yes.
I mean, people who don't have access to continuous corporate training or who lack deep professional networks.
That is the most pressing ethical and structural risk identified in all the source material.
Yeah.
Without intentional intervention, this transition will dramatically exacerbate existing economic inequalities. That is exactly why the text argues heavily for organizations to adopt inclusive growth frameworks.
Okay, let's break down what an inclusive growth framework actually looks like in practice.
Sure. So it involves moving away from lazy hiring filters,
Like what?
like demanding a 4-year university degree for a role that doesn't actually require one, and instead shifting to strictly skills-based hiring.
Okay, that makes sense. Focus on what they can do, not a piece of paper.
Right. And it also requires rigorous algorithmic auditing.
What does that mean?
Well, if you train a new AI recruitment tool on 10 years of your company's historical hiring data, and your human managers historically exhibited bias against certain demographics.
But the AI just copies them.
Exactly. The AI will silently learn those biases and begin filtering out diverse candidates at an even larger scale.
Wow.
So algorithmic auditing is the active, ongoing process of stress testing your AI systems with varied scenarios to ensure they are making fair, equitable decisions.
So you have to treat the AI like an employee that requires constant performance reviews.
Yes, to ensure it isn't replicating the worst parts of our history.
Well, the ultimate takeaway from Dr. Westover's analysis and the PwC data is that this is not a zero-sum game between humans and machines.
Not at all.
The organizations and the individuals who will thrive over the next decade are those who stop treating AI as a competitor arriving to steal their output
Right.
and start treating it as a collaborative partner whose primary function is to amplify distinctly human traits.
Absolutely.
If leaders make the conscious choice to pursue strategic expansion over defensive cost-cutting, this technology truly can raise all boats. It can boost overall hiring, increase wages, and dramatically improve the daily quality of the work we do by stripping away the robotic tasks and leaving us with the deeply human ones.
It requires a profound level of leadership commitment to workflow redesign and procedural justice, of course.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, but the data clearly indicates that the structural payoff is completely worth the friction of the transition.
We have covered incredible ground today, from the mechanics of the productivity and complementarity effects to the intense seniorization of early career roles and the sheer necessity of redesigning how a company actually operates.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as you look at your own workplace. It is something not explicitly answered in the research, but it is the logical endpoint of everything we have discussed.
Okay.
We know the data prove that AI is rapidly pushing human workers toward roles that require heavy empathy, complex judgment, and trust building.
Right, the human elements.
But we also know that corporate environments are relentlessly aggressive about driving growth and measuring efficiency.
Always.
So if the AI handles all the measurable spreadsheets and your primary job becomes human connection, how long until organizations try to quantify your empathy as a corporate performance metric? How long until you have a strict empathy quota you have to hit every quarter? And if we inevitably turn human connection into a rigid, trackable KPI just to keep pace with the efficiency of a machine, do we risk losing the very authenticity that makes us irreplaceable in the first place?
That is a fascinating question.
It is a tension you will certainly need to navigate as the nature of your work evolves. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the sources. We will see you next time.